My name is Alice Stanton. I am 32 years old. Last Saturday, at a dinner celebrating my sister's engagement, my mother introduced me to the groom's family. She smiled at them with that smile she reserves for the neighbors, warm, thoroughly rehearsed, and said, "This is our other daughter. She cleans houses for a living." My father nodded, not even batting an eyelid. "We've written her off," he added. 23 guests, white linen tablecloths, baskets of artisan sourdough still warm from the oven, and the groom's mother, a woman I had already met once, 18 months prior, across a boardroom table put down her fork, looked me dead in the eye, and quietly asked, "Wait, is that you?" The colour completely drained from my mother's face. What happened over the next 40 minutes broke something in my family that I don't think can ever be put back together. But first, I need to explain how we reached this point, because the dinner was just the explosion. The fuse had been burning for 10 years. Let's go back a decade, to the evening my family decided I wasn't worth the investment. I grew up in Oakhaven, West Sussex, a market town of about 9,000 people. One of those places where everyone knows what car your father drives and your mother's recipe for Sunday roast. My father, Arthur, had worked at the same high street insurance firm for 30 years. Same desk, same title, regional claims adjuster. He got the promotion at 31 and stayed planted there ever since. My mother, Eleanor, was a smart woman. She could calculate payroll in her head. Before I was born, she did the bookkeeping for 3 local businesses. Then she fell pregnant with me, and my father told her it was time to stay at home. So she did, and she never went back. I don't think she ever forgave us for that. Not me, not my sister, not truly. My sister, Daisy, is 4 years younger than me. She's 28 now, working as a marketing executive at an agency in Manchester. In 3 years, she has been promoted twice, and every time it happens, my mother rings me. Not to share the news about Daisy, but to make absolutely certain I know about it. The wall in our living room tells the whole story. Daisy's university degree, her Employee of the Quarter plaque, her University Society photograph. My framed pictures stop at my secondary school graduation. 4 years studying business at university, that was the last thing I did that made any sense to them. There is a rhythm to how my mother introduces us at Waitrose, at the parish fete, at family gatherings. Daisy's just had another promotion. A pause, then the pivot. And Alice is still doing her own thing. My father never corrects her. He adds no details. He just stands there, hands in his pockets, staring at the floor like a man waiting for his number to be called at the deli counter. Silence is a form of agreement. I learned that early. The summer I turned 22, I had a degree in business management and a suitcase full of plans. My mother had other plans. She had enrolled me in a master's program at a Russell Group university, paid the deposit, bragged about it to my father's colleagues, printed the syllabus, and left it on my bedside table like a prayer book. One Thursday evening, I sat her down at the kitchen table and told her I wasn't going. "I'm starting a commercial cleaning company," I said. I had a folder filled with calculations, market research, expense forecasts, cash flow projections for the next 12 months. She didn't even glance at the folder. 14 seconds. That's exactly how long she sat in silence. I counted the ticks of the wall clock behind her. Then she said, "You want to scrub toilets? That's your grand master plan?" My father walked in from the hallway. He had heard enough. "I already told Derek at work about your masters." Daisy was at a friend's house. Later that evening she texted me, "Mum says you're causing drama." The only person who asked to see the folder was my gran, Violet. She is 78 now, but she was 68 then, and sharp as a tax audit. She sat on the porch, read every single page, and said, "Show me where you'll be in year 3. She gave me £500 from her savings and a handkerchief. White cotton, hand-embroidered with her initials, VS. She pressed it into my palm and said, "For the hard days." That same evening, my mother announced that if I wanted to mop floors, I'd be doing it without her money. She cut me off financially. I packed my folder into my rucksack and drove 4 hours north to Manchester. I didn't argue. I just got behind the wheel and drove. My first flat cost £450 a month. A studio, 1 window, a radiator that banged at 3:00 a.m., like someone was trapped inside the wall. I bought a battered white transit van for £1,500, no logos. The air conditioning worked on Tuesdays and Fridays for no discernible reason. My first client was a dental practice on Deansgate. 3 treatment rooms, a waiting area, and a washroom with mint green tiles. About £150 a week. I cleaned it myself every morning at 5:00 a.m. spent the afternoon knocking on doors, and did my bookkeeping at the kitchen counter in the evening. Within 6 months, I had 4 contracts. I was working 7 days a week, and my shoulders ached so deeply the pain didn't even stop when I slept. By the end of the first year, I hit a revenue of £50,000, with a profit of about £8,500. I hired my first employee, Agnieszka, a Polish single mother, who turned up 15 minutes early for every shift and never once complained. She is still with me today. Every Sunday, I rang Gran Violet. She asked for specifics. How many clients? What's your conversion rate? Have you sorted your public liability insurance yet? She listened the way people listen when they believe that what you are building is real. A week later, I would ring home. My mother would answer, and the conversation was always identical. Are you ready to come home yet? Not yet, Mum. But tell Daisy congratulations on the new job. My father never once came to the phone. By year 3, something happened that almost made me pick up the phone and call my mother to boast. Almost. But by then, I already knew that in our family, almost doesn't count. Year 3 changed everything. I signed a contract for a 12-story office building in Salford. Annual value, £250,000. I opened a second branch and hired my 38th employee. Revenue surpassed £1 million. I was 25. I was running a company that cleaned more square footage in a week than most people walk in a year. I rang my mother. Mum, I just signed a £250,000 a year contract. A pause. Then. And how many people are you sending to mop floors now? 38. 38 people mopping floors. Fascinating. My father's voice came over the speakerphone. Your sister's just been accepted onto the executive leadership scheme at her agency. I sat in my office, a real one by then, with a desk, a filing cabinet, and a framed photo of Gran Violet on the shelf, and stared at my freshly printed business card. Navy blue crisp font. Stanton Commercial Services. Underneath, the slogan, excellence in every detail. I had designed it myself. I spent 2 days choosing the exact shade of blue. That was the last time I willingly offered my parents information about my business. I didn't make a dramatic decision. There were no grand declarations. I just ran out of doors to knock on. When you tell someone you've signed a £250,000 contract and their response is, "How many people are you sending to mop floors?" the message is clear. They have already decided who you are. New information will not change the file. For the next 7 years, they believed exactly what they wanted to believe. And I didn't get in their way. Further, faster. Stanton Commercial Services. 14 regions across the UK. 283 employees. Annual revenue of roughly £5 million. We service private hospitals, universities, corporate headquarters, and civic buildings. My staff retention rate is 87%, the highest in the industry. I created an ESL training program for our immigrant staff that 3 of my competitors have tried to copy. I live in Manchester. I drive a 2019 Volkswagen Estate. I own a city centre apartment outright, bought with cash. And on my desk sits a spray bottle of homemade lemon and white vinegar cleaning solution, because I still love the smell. It reminds me of the beginning. None of this is a secret. I have a website, a LinkedIn page, even a short Wikipedia entry that I didn't write. My parents haven't looked at a single source. Then Daisy rang. For the first time in 4 months, I was reviewing a tender for a new site when her name lit up my screen. I almost let it ring out. "I'm getting married," she said. "Julian Harrington. His family is hosting a dinner next Saturday. Mum wants you there. Does Mum want me there, or do you want me there? It matters. Gran Violet is coming. She specifically asked for you." That settled it. When Gran asks, I show up. After the call, I typed the name into my laptop. Harrington Estates, 200 commercial properties across the Northwest and Yorkshire. I knew the name. I knew it very well. 18 months ago, my company won a contract to clean 47 of their buildings, £3 million a year, the largest deal in my company's history. The contract was signed by the CEO and chairwoman, Catherine Harrington, the groom's mother. I stared at the screen for a long time. On Friday afternoon, the day before the dinner, I stood in my office looking at the spray bottle on my desk. Lemon, white vinegar, water. The exact recipe I mixed in my studio flat 10 years ago when I couldn't afford commercial chemicals. I unscrewed the cap and held it to my nose. Citrus and acid. It smelled like 5 a.m., shifts, aching shoulders, and mint green tiles. It smelled like the start of everything. That evening, I chose my outfit. A navy blue silk blouse, the exact shade of my company's logo, though nobody at that dinner would know it. Black tailored trousers, flat shoes. The only jewelry was a delicate gold chain Gran Violet gave me for my 30th birthday. I wasn't dressing to impress. I wasn't dressing to prove a point. I was dressing the way I dress every day, like a woman who has work to do. On Saturday morning, I rang Gran. "Gran, I'm setting off. Drive safely, darling." She paused. Over the last year, her voice had grown thinner. Her heart medication drained her, and I could hear it. "And Alice, don't let your mother make you small." I got onto the M6 and headed south. 4 hours to West Sussex. 4 hours of grey motorway, service stations and radio stations fading in and out like old friends. 4 hours to decide which version of myself I was willing to bring into that room. I thought about Catherine Harrington. She would be there. She would recognize me. I didn't know what she would say, or what my parents would say when she said it. I didn't plan anything. I want to make that perfectly clear. I drove to that dinner for one reason only, for a 78-year-old woman with a failing heart who wanted to see her granddaughter. Everything else just happened. The Birchgrove Gastropub sat just off an A road outside Oakhaven. Farm-to-table menu, exposed brickwork. The sort of place where bread is served in linen napkins and a pork chop costs £30. I pulled into the car park at 6:55 p.m, 5 minutes early. My mother's silver Volvo was already there, parked right by the entrance. Arthur's coat hung in the back seat. Daisy's white Range Rover Evoque was parked 2 spaces down. A just-engaged bumper sticker was plastered on the back, perfectly straight, as if applied with a spirit level. The private dining room was at the back. A long oval table, settings for 23, warm ambient lighting, baskets of bread, water glasses already filled. My mother met me at the door. She wore a plum-coloured dress and a necklace I hadn't seen before, bought for the occasion, no doubt. She hugged me fast, tight. Her hand gripped my shoulder the way one grips a steering wheel in a storm. "You look comfortable," she said, her eyes scanning my blouse and flat shoes. She smiled. The smile didn't reach her eyes. Behind her stood Arthur. He shook my hand, his own daughter's hand, and said, "Good of you to come." He looked at my left ear the entire time. Daisy crossed the room in heels, her ring catching the light. She hugged me with both arms, which surprised me. "Thanks for coming, Al." She introduced me to Julian, tall, excessively polite, firm handshake, and said, "This is my older sister. She lives in Manchester. Just the city, no grand titles." At the far end of the table, I spotted Gran Violet. In a wheelchair now, thinner than she was 3 months ago. A cardigan buttoned to the neck. She reached out her hand before I could extend mine. "There's my girl." I sat next to her. Catherine hadn't arrived yet. The starters were brought out. Prawn cocktail blinnies, mini crab cakes, a British cheese board large enough to feed a rugby team. Eleanor worked the room like a campaign manager. She introduced everyone in turn. Every family member came with a label. "This is my brother Terry, former fire chief, 31 years of service. My niece Sophie, just finished her nursing degree, top of her class." Everyone got a title, a rank, a reason to be respected. She skipped me, not theatrically, not with a dramatic pause. She just walked past my chair, the way you walk past a floor lamp that's been there so long you no longer see it. Charles Harrington noticed, Julian's father, silver hair, an easy smile, the kind of man who asks questions because he's genuinely curious, not just making polite conversation. He leaned across the table. "And what is it you do, Alice?" Before I could answer, my mother's voice cut in from 2 seats down. "Oh, Alice does a bit of domestic cleaning. You know how it is." She waved her hand dismissively, as if brushing crumbs off the table. I picked up my water glass, took a sip, and set it down. Charles nodded politely. Julian's sister, Penelope, 26, warm eyes, a primary school teacher from Leeds, tilted her head. "Oh, like a cleaning service? That's brilliant." Eleanor smiled thinly. "Well, it pays the bills." Under the table, Gran Violet found my hand. She squeezed it once, hard. Her joints were swollen, but her grip was iron. I squeezed back. Then the main door opened. Heels clicking on the hardwood floor. A voice from the hallway apologizing for the traffic on the A23. Catherine Harrington walked into the private room, and everything I thought I knew about the evening shifted. Catherine Harrington was 61, and she looked like a woman who had earned every single one of those years on her own terms. A silver bob, a sharp grey blazer over a black silk top. No excessive jewelry, just a watch that probably cost more than my first van. She moved through the room with the efficiency of someone chairing a quarterly board meeting. Handshake, name, eye contact. Move on. Julian kissed her cheek. Charles pulled out her chair. Eleanor was beaming, saying something about how lovely it was to finally meet in person. Catherine walked around the table, drew level with me, and stopped. For half a second, maybe less, but I saw it. Something flickered in her eyes. Recognition. Then, instantaneous recalibration. Her gaze dropped to my blouse. Navy blue. The exact shade she had seen across a boardroom table in Leeds 18 months ago. She took my hand and held it just a fraction longer than the others. "Alice, how lovely to see you here." Her voice was smooth, warm, but tucked inside it was a question she wasn't quite ready to unwrap. "Mrs. Harrington, lovely to see you too." She sat opposite me, placed her napkin on her lap, accepted a glass of water from the waiter, and then, very quietly, looked at me again. Nobody noticed. Eleanor was telling Charles about Daisy winning a regional marketing award. Arthur was studying the wine list as if it contained a secret message from God. Daisy was laughing at something Julian whispered to her. But I noticed, and Catherine knew I noticed. For the next 20 minutes, she didn't say anything extraordinary. She ate her starter, complimented the crab cakes, asked Julian about the new flat, and waited. Let me tell you about my first meeting with Catherine Harrington. 18 months prior to this dinner, I took the train to Leeds for the biggest pitch of my career. Harrington Estates managed over 200 commercial properties, office towers, medical complexes, mixed-use developments across 4 regions. They were looking for a single contractor to handle the cleaning for 47 of their sites. Contract value, £3 million a year. I wore my navy blue suit. I brought a 40-page proposal I had spent 3 weeks building. Service-level agreements, staffing models, quality control protocols, cost comparisons. I printed 5 copies and drove to a 2-4-hour print shop at midnight to have them spiral-bound. Catherine chaired the meeting. 6 people on their side of the table. She asked more questions than the other 5 combined. She wanted to know staff retention rates. 80%. She asked about training. 40 hours induction, monthly audits, dedicated support for staff whose first language isn't English. She asked why I started the business. I told her the truth, because at 22 I was cleaning an office with a spray bottle and someone else's mop, and I decided that no human being doing that work should ever have to feel invisible. She didn't smile, but she wrote something down. After the contract was signed, she walked me to the lift. "I've signed a lot of contracts, Alice. This is the first time I felt the person across the table cared as much about the people doing the work as they did about the profit margin." I carried those words in my head for months, because for the first time, someone with real power looked at what I had built and called it exactly what it was. My parents had 10 years to say something like that. A stranger said it in 15 minutes. Back to the dinner. The main course arrived pan-seared Scottish salmon, seasonal veg, crushed new potatoes. Nobody paid much attention to the food because the conversation had steered towards careers. Charles Harrington opened the door. "Well, Eleanor, you must be incredibly proud of both your daughters." My mother put her fork down and tilted her head. That look, half smile, half calculation. I had seen it 1,000 times. She was framing the shot. "Oh, Daisy is our absolute star. Promoted twice in 3 years. Her agency just handed her their biggest client." Eleanor touched Daisy's arm. Daisy smiled, looking modest, but not modest enough to stop her. Eleanor paused, letting the silence do the heavy lifting, then pivoted. "Alice has taken a different path. She's more hands-on." Arthur didn't need a cue. He leaned towards Charles, like 2 blokes sharing a joke at the pub. "She started cleaning offices after uni. We thought it was a phase." He chuckled. 10 years later, he trailed off, shrugging as if the rest wasn't worth saying. Penelope looked at me. Julian stared at his plate. Charles stopped chewing. I cut a piece of salmon with a steady hand, chewed, swallowed, and took a sip of water. At the end of the table, Gran Violet put her fork down so hard it clattered against the porcelain. "Alice is doing exceptionally well, Eleanor." My mother didn't miss a beat. The smile remained flawless. "Of course she is, Mum. Nobody's saying otherwise." Nobody's saying otherwise. That was her method. No accusation could ever be pinned on her. It was all implication, layered so thickly you couldn't breathe under it. Catherine Harrington picked up her water glass, but didn't drink. She hadn't taken her eyes off my mother for 30 seconds. Eleanor didn't notice. She never looked at the people who were truly watching her. Between the main course and dessert, I excused myself and walked out. The loo was at the end of a narrow corridor. Cream walls and framed watercolors of barns, the kind of art that only exists in gastropubs and waiting rooms. When I came out, Arthur was waiting in the corridor. Hands in his pockets, shoulders slumped. looking like a man who had been standing there a long time trying to decide whether to stay or run. "Al, you all right?" "I'm fine, Dad." He shifted his weight from one foot to the other. "I know your mum can be a bit much, but she means well." "Does she?" He opened his mouth. Something flickered across his face. Not courage, but the ghost of it. Like a man reaching for a door handle in the dark. His fingers twisted his wedding ring. 1 turn, 2 turns. Then, from the dining room, "Arthur, could you order some more wine?" My mother's voice. Crisp, sharp. The way you call back a dog that's wandered too far off the path. He blinked. "Better go." He turned and walked back. Didn't look over his shoulder. Not another word. I stood in that corridor, watching him disappear into the warm light of the dining room, and thought, that was his absolute maximum. That aborted sentence in a pub corridor was the very best Arthur Stanton had to offer, and even then, he couldn't finish it. I had stopped relying on almost a long time ago. I went into the bathroom and washed my hands. The soap was lemon-scented, sharp, acidic, familiar. It hit my chest like a song you hear in a supermarket 15 years after it meant something to you. I dried my hands, exhaled, and walked back to the table. I sat down. Gran Violet touched my wrist, her way of asking without asking. I nodded. She let go. Daisy had stepped over to the window to speak to Julian. Her phone lay face down on the table next to her plate. The screen lit up. A banner notification. A WhatsApp group chat. Wedding planning with a ring emoji. I didn't pick up the phone. I didn't touch it. But the message flashed right there on the white tablecloth, and my eyes work perfectly well. Eleanor's name. Sent 2 hours before the dinner. Whatever happens, do not let Alice talk about her job. The Harringtons do not need to know we have a cleaner in the family. Beneath it, from Daisy, sent an hour before the dinner. Sorted. I'll introduce her as my sister from Manchester. Leave it at that. I read both sentences twice. Then the screen went black. There were 23 people in this room. 3 of them had prearranged a strategy to keep me small. It wasn't a careless remark. It wasn't an accidental slip of the tongue. It was a strategy, time-stamped and documented. I picked up my water glass, took a sip, and set it down. Gran Violet was studying my face. From her angle, she couldn't see the phone, but she read something in my jaw, in my shoulders, in the way I held the glass. "Are you all right, darling?" "Yes, Gran. I just see things very clearly now." She didn't pry. Violet never pushes. She spent 78 years learning when to speak and when to let the silence carry the weight. Daisy returned to the table, picked up her phone without glancing at the screen, and slipped it into her handbag. She gave me a bright, breezy smile, a smile that had never once considered what it cost me. The waiter handed out dessert menus. I didn't open mine. Under the table, I unclasped my purse and found the handkerchief. White cotton, softened by 10 years. The monogram had faded from navy to a dusky twilight blue, VS, but I could still feel the stitching under my thumb. Gran had pressed this into my hand the night I left Oakhaven. I had carried it every single day since. Through the studio flat, the first contract, the second branch, the 50th employee, the 100th building. It was in my pocket when I signed the deal with the Harringtons. It was with me now. I ran my thumb over the embroidery and thought about the WhatsApp chat. 2 messages, 6 sentences, 10 years of assumptions, booked and confirmed like a dinner reservation. This wasn't ignorance. They knew enough to plan a detour. They knew enough to agree on a script. Do not let Alice talk about her job. As if my life's work was a stain that needed covering up before company arrived. I didn't decide to expose anyone. I didn't plot revenge or mentally rehearse a monologue. I simply made a decision that was 10 years overdue. I was going to stop making myself smaller than I am. If I was asked a direct question, I would give a direct answer. No downplaying, no deflecting, no performative humility for the sake of people who had never once protected me. Catherine caught my eye across the table. She was slowly stirring cream into her coffee, with the precision of a woman who misses absolutely nothing. "How do you find Manchester?" she asked. "Busy," I said. "In the best possible way." She nodded, took a sip, and said nothing more. But I could see her doing the maths. The woman Eleanor described, versus the woman she met in a boardroom, the numbers didn't add up. And Catherine Harrington did not tolerate bad arithmetic. Dessert plates hadn't even touched the table when my mother stood up. She tapped her knife against her wine glass, 2 sharp clinks. The room fell silent. "I'd just like to say a few words." She pressed a hand to her chest. Her eyes glistened exactly on cue. I'd seen this at funerals, at church coffee mornings, at PTA meetings when she needed a budget approved. Eleanor Stanton could summon tears the way other people summon a taxi. "When I look at Daisy," she said, her voice wobbling flawlessly, I see everything I ever dreamed of for my daughter. She spoke for 2 full minutes. Daisy's degree, Daisy's career, Daisy's poise, Daisy's kindness, Daisy, Daisy, Daisy. Every sentence a brick in the monument to the daughter who followed the blueprints. She did not say my name once. Charles Harrington shifted in his seat. He glanced at me, then back at Eleanor. He was the kind of man who notices when someone is being left off the ledger. He waited for a pause, right as she drew a breath. "And your eldest daughter," he said gently. "Alice, isn't it? She's here to celebrate too." My mother blinked, regrouped, found her footing. She looked at me the way one looks at a wine stain on a tablecloth that you thought had been bleached out. "This is our other daughter," she said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "She cleans houses for a living." She said it with a smile, as if it were a quaint, amusing little footnote to an otherwise flawless family CV. Arthur chimed in from his seat, unprompted. "We've written her off." And he laughed. Nobody laughed with him. 2 seconds of dead silence. Catherine Harrington slowly lowered her fork. She placed it down the way you place an object when you've decided your next action is going to be definitive. 23 people were watching, and Catherine wasn't blinking. The silence held for 3 full seconds, long enough for the waiter to freeze mid-pour over Charles's water glass. Penelope stared at her plate. Julian slid his hand under the table and rested it on Daisy's knee. I saw the movement. Uncle Terry coughed into his fist. Catherine turned to me. Her voice was level, unhurried, the exact same tone she used in the boardroom in Leeds when she asked about staff retention. "Alice, I'm curious. Tell me about your cleaning work." Eleanor reacted instantly. "Oh, it's really nothing special." Her smile widened, the emergency protocol activating when the narrative slips out of her grasp. "She goes to houses, does a bit of scrubbing. She's been doing it since uni." Catherine didn't even look at her. "I would like to hear from Alice, if you don't mind." The sentence landed on the table like a dropped wine glass. Polite, clear, final. I folded my napkin. "I own a commercial cleaning company," I said. "We service office buildings, private hospitals, and universities." Eleanor's smile tightened. She makes it sound so official. Catherine kept her eyes locked on me. "How many regions?" 14. Arthur's fork clinked against his plate. He hadn't moved it. His hand had just twitched. "How many employees?" 283, as of last month. Daisy's head slowly turned towards me, the way someone looks up from their phone and realizes the house across the street is on fire. Charles leaned back in his chair. Penelope's lips parted. Julian looked at his mother with an expression I recognized. A man realizing the conversation happening above his security clearance. Eleanor's smile vanished, replaced by nothing, a blank wall where a window used to be. Catherine reached into her handbag. She pulled out a business card, navy blue, crisp font. At the bottom, a slogan I could read from across the table because I had spent 2 days choosing every single word. Stanton Commercial Services. Excellence in every detail. Catherine placed it on the white tablecloth in front of my mother. Face up, dead center. "Wait, is that you?" she said quietly. It wasn't a question seeking confirmation. She already knew. She was asking it for Eleanor's benefit. "Yes, Mrs. Harrington." Catherine looked at my mother, then at my father, then back at me. Her voice carried the way voices carry in a courtroom. Measured, factual, unvarnished. "My company signed a £3 million a year contract with Stanton Commercial Services 18 months ago. 47 buildings across 4 regions. Alice pitched the proposal herself." She paused. She sat across my boardroom table. I watched my mother's face. I had seen Eleanor Stanton in every conceivable state. Furious, wounded, theatrical, cold. I had seen her cry at school nativities, shout at supermarket cashiers, deliver eulogies that made grown men weep. But never once, in 32 years, had I seen the color physically drain from her face. It started in her cheeks, moved to her lips. Her hand, still gripping her wineglass, went white at the knuckles. Arthur's hand froze halfway to his glass, suspended like a paused video. Daisy stared at me, her mouth slightly open. Her engagement ring caught the light, but she wasn't looking at it anymore. Gran Violet didn't move, didn't speak. She just looked at Eleanor with an expression I couldn't put a name to until that exact moment. It was patience. The kind of patience you have when a lie you've known about for a decade finally meets the oxygen in the room. 4 seconds of silence. Then everyone spoke at once. Julian leaned forward. "Wait, Alice, you run the company?" Penelope. 14 regions? Uncle Terry turned to my father. "Arthur, did you know about this?" Charles Harrington placed his napkin on the table and looked at my father the way an executive looks at a colleague who has just been caught lying at a board meeting. "Arthur, you said you'd written her off." Arthur picked up his wine glass, took a gulp, and said nothing. Eleanor recovered first. She always recovers first. 30 years of controlling the narrative in Oakhaven, West Sussex, doesn't crumble in one evening. She leaned forward, clasped her hands together, and found a new voice. Warmer, wider, astonished, convincing, exactly as smooth as it needed to be. "But she never told us it was this serious." She gave a little breathless laugh. "Alice is so secretive, we had absolutely no idea." She turned to Catherine, feigning maternal wonder. "I always knew she'd make a success of it." I put my fork down. "You knew, Mum." "I told you in year 3, and in year 5. You did not." "I did, and I remember your exact words. How many people are you sending to mop floors now?" Eleanor's face hardened for a fraction of a second, then smoothed out again. "I never said that." From the far end of the table, Gran Violet's voice cut through. Quiet, steady, final. "You did, Eleanor. On speakerphone. I was in the room." Violet didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She delivered the sentence calmly, like a woman who had spent 78 years gathering evidence for the precise moment it was required. Arthur reached for the breadbasket, put his hand on a roll, but didn't pick it up. He froze, like a man who had forgotten why he reached for it in the first place. My mother's eyes filled with tears, right on schedule. She pressed a napkin to her mouth and gasped. A trembling, theatrical intake of breath designed to drag the spotlight back to her. "I cannot believe you would do this to me," she said, her voice cracking. "At your sister's engagement dinner. This night is not about you, Alice." She turned to Catherine, shifting to a soft, conspiratorial tone. One mother to another. "I am so sorry. Families can be complicated." She dabbed the corner of her eye with the napkin. "We've always tried to support both our girls. We really have." Daisy reached out to touch her mother's arm. A reflex. The golden child, trained to comfort on command. "I didn't take the bait. I didn't bring this up, Mum. You introduced me as the cleaner." Catherine asked a question, and I answered it. Daisy snatched her hand back from our mother and glared at me. "Can you just stop? This is my night." Her voice was high, pitched, not angry, just cornered. "Why do you always have to make everything about you?" "Daisy, I have been sitting here eating my salmon. I didn't give a speech. I didn't interrupt anyone. I answered a direct question." Catherine spoke up. Not loudly. She didn't need volume. She had gravity. "Daisy, nobody is trying to ruin your evening. But your mother made specific statements about your sister in front of my family that were entirely false." She folded her hands on the table. "In my experience, facts are not drama." The room held its breath. Penelope reached for her glass. Charles sat completely still. Julian looked at his mother with a mix of awe and terror. Gran Violet sat in her wheelchair at the end of the table, looking at her daughter the way you look at a house you've been warning everyone about, which has finally caught fire. Arthur tried to diffuse it. "Well, quite the floor show for dinner, eh?" He let out a nervous chuckle. The sound hit the room like a coin dropped in a quiet church. Nobody laughed. He shifted in his seat, adjusted his collar, and tried to deploy his reasonable, managerial voice, the one he used at the insurance office when a claim got complicated. "Alice, look, we didn't know the scale of it. You could have told us. We're not mind readers. I told you, Dad. 3 times. You stopped listening, so I stopped talking." Charles Harrington leaned forward, not aggressively, just honestly, the way a man speaks when he fundamentally doesn't understand something and refuses to pretend he does. "Arthur, I have to say, if my child built a business turning over millions of pounds, I'd be shouting it from the rooftops to everyone in this room." Arthur's jaw clenched. That sentence struck the nerve he had spent 30 years protecting. The mediocre career, the stagnant job title, 3 decades of convincing himself that the regional desk was enough. Charles didn't mean to expose him. He was just stating a fact. But facts are shrapnel when they land near an unhealed wound. Catherine added, softly but with lethal precision. "Alice's company has the highest staff retention rate of all our contractors, 87%. She has built something exceptional." Eleanor jumped back in, desperate to plug the leak. But how are we supposed to know if she keeps it all to herself? From the end of the table, Gran Violet's voice again. That voice that doesn't need to shout because everyone already knows its weight. "Eleanor, you just didn't want to hear it." My mother looked at my grandmother, and for the first time all evening, I saw something on her face I had never seen before. Not shame, not anger. Fear. The table splintered into hushed, fractured conversations. Julian was whispering furiously to Daisy. Charles was topping up Catherine's water glass. Uncle Terry excused himself to the loo and stayed away so long you'd assume he was phoning his wife. Eleanor stood up, smoothed down her plum dress, and walked towards the exit. She stopped by my chair, not looking down. "Come with me." I followed. Not because she ordered me to, but because I wanted to hear what she would say without 22 pairs of ears listening. The corridor was quiet. The watercolors of Barnes stared down at us. Eleanor spun around, the tears instantly gone. Her eyes were dry, hard, clear. "You planned this. You came here to humiliate me." "I came because Gran Violet asked me to." "Don't hide behind my mother. You knew Catherine would be here. You knew she'd recognize you. You set this whole thing up." "I didn't set up anything, Mum. I arrived, I sat down, I ate my dinner. You were the one who introduced me as the family cleaner." Her jaw clenched. She changed tactics. "If you think this changes anything, you're wrong. You're still the girl who chose scrubbing toilets over a proper education. I have a degree, Mum. I chose a different path, and you chose to pretend it didn't exist. After everything I sacrificed for you. After everything I gave up, you sacrificed your career. I know. You remind me every time we speak, but that was your choice, Mum. This is mine." She pointed a finger at me. "If you walk away from this family, you will have nothing." I looked at her. At this woman who had traded her calculator for a kitchen, hated the choice, and punished me for making a different one. I will have exactly what I have right now. A company with 283 employees, and a grandmother who actually knows my name. She flinched. She turned and marched back into the dining room. Back straight, mask firmly in place. A woman who would never leave a crowded room looking defeated, no matter what had just transpired in the hallway. Before I could walk back in, Daisy intercepted me. She was crying. Real tears. I could tell the difference. Eleanor's tears always came with eye contact and perfect timing. Daisy's mascara was running, and her voice caught on syllables she couldn't control. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" she demanded. "I'm your sister." I leaned back against the corridor wall. "When was the last time you asked me about my life, Daisy?" Not texted about Christmas logistics, but actually asked. She opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again. Nothing came out. "I'm not angry with you," I said. "You believed what Mum said because it was easier than checking for yourself. I thought you were struggling. Mum said you were. Mum said what she needed to believe, and you never once questioned it." She pressed her back against the opposite wall. There was 1.5 meters of hallway between us, the closest we had been in years, and simultaneously the furthest apart. "So you really operate in 14 regions? 14 regions. 283 people who turn up every morning because the work matters. And a grandmother who rings me every Sunday to ask how I am." Daisy's face crumpled, not out of shame, but something deeper. The crushing realization that she had outsourced her relationship with her sister to a woman who had lied about both of us for a decade. She didn't apologize. She wasn't ready for that word yet, but she didn't defend our mother either. And in this family, silence in response to Eleanor is its own kind of rebellion. I walked back to the table. Daisy followed a minute later, eyes red, clutching a napkin to her face. This is the part of the story I almost didn't tell, because what I said next at that table is the reason my family will never be the same again. If you're reading this and thinking of someone who needs to hear the truth, bear with me. The next few minutes changed everything. I walked back into the private dining room and stood behind my chair. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't grip the table or square my shoulders or do any of the things people do in films when they're about to deliver the speech of a lifetime. I just stood there, one hand on the back of my chair, the other in my pocket, my thumb pressing into the embroidered initials on Gran Violet's handkerchief. I'm going to say this once. The table froze. Forks stopped in midair. Coffee cups hovered. Even the waiter by the door went perfectly still, a tray of petit fours balanced on his arm. I love this family. For 10 years, I have loved this family from a distance, because that distance was the only way I could breathe. I looked at my mother. "Mum, tonight you introduced me as the person who cleans houses." I looked at my father. "Dad, you told a table full of strangers that you had written me off." I let that hang in the air, in front of people I had never met, in front of my grandmother. I looked at Violet. She was sitting with both hands resting on the table, as calm as a high court judge. Her eyes were shining, but her chin was raised. "Gran never wrote me off," she asked. She listened. She showed up. I turned my focus back to the center of the table. I am not here to embarrass anyone. I came because Gran wanted to see me. But I will no longer sit at a table where my own parents describe me as less than I am. I took a breath. So this is what changes. I will always answer Gran's phone calls. I will always visit when she asks. But I will not attend another family gathering where I am expected to pretend I am smaller than I am. That is my boundary. It's not a punishment, it's a decision. I sat down, picked up my water glass and took a sip. For 5 seconds the room was dead silent. Then Eleanor broke. She stood up, her chair legs scraping harshly against the floorboards. You can't just... Her voice cracked. She caught it, rebuilt it, then lost it again. You can't just walk away. I am your mother. I looked at her, completely calm, then be one. 3 words. They dropped into the room like a stone into a still pond, the ripples hitting every corner. Eleanor's composure shattered, not the performative, theatrical kind, genuine. Her chest heaved, her hands shook at the edge of the table, tears spilled down her face, and for the first time, I couldn't tell if they were real or rehearsed. Maybe she couldn't either. I gave this family everything. Everything. My career, my ambitions, my... She cut herself off. She looked around the room. She saw the Harringtons watching. She saw Charles's face. She saw Catherine's stillness. She realized she had said too much in front of the very people she had spent all evening trying to impress. Catherine spoke, her voice quiet. Eleanor, your daughter has built something remarkable. Perhaps it's time you saw it. Eleanor snapped her head around. You don't know our family. I know your daughter, Catherine replied. That is sufficient. Arthur sat in his chair, mute and immobile. He hadn't moved for several minutes. He was going to ride this out just like he had ridden out 30 years of marriage, physically present, but absent for anything that mattered. From the far end of the table. Sit down, Eleanor. Gran Violet. Her voice was thin, but forged from iron. My mother sat down. Not because she agreed, not because she surrendered, but because Violet was still her mother. And even Eleanor Stanton, the orchestrator of narratives and commander of tears, could not disobey that voice in front of 23 witnesses. The tension in the room exhaled. I hadn't raised my voice once. I pushed my chair back and walked to the end of the table. Violet was sitting in her wheelchair, hands folded in her lap. Her cardigan had slipped off one shoulder. I pulled it back up without thinking. The way you adjust clothing for someone you love mechanically and quietly. I knelt down beside her. She took my hands. Her fingers were frail, the knuckles swollen, the skin cool like parchment. But the grip was pure violet. You don't have to stay for me, darling, she said. Her voice was so low only I could hear it. You showed up. That's enough. I'll ring you on Sunday. Usual time. You'd better. I kissed her forehead. She smelled of lavender, wool, and the cedar wardrobe in her flat, where she keeps the quilts she made in the 70s. She pressed something into my palm. A folded piece of paper, small enough to hide in my fist. I gripped it without looking. I stood up and turned to Catherine. Thank you for your questions, Mrs. Harrington. Catherine gave a single, measured nod. Thank you for your answers, Alice. I picked up my handbag from the back of my chair. And then, because some things need to be left where they can be found, I unzipped the side pocket, took out my business card, and placed it on the table right next to my mother's setting. Navy blue, crisp font, excellence in every detail. Then I walked out. Steady steps, flat shoes against hardwood. I didn't run. I didn't look back. Behind me, I heard my mother say something sharp, clipping her syllables, already drafting the revised version of this story for her friends. But I was past the hostess stand before the words could catch me. The heavy front door closed behind me with a clean, final click. I drove nearly 11 miles before I pulled over at a small parish church. Whitewashed, empty, save for a cleaner's van parked round the back, the kind of place you stop when you need to sit with something too heavy for the confines of a car. I turned off the engine. The dashboard clock read 21:07. Through the windscreen, I watched a security light cast a pale circle onto the gravel. I opened my fist. Gran Violet's note, folded in half. The handwriting was shaky, elderly. The letters leaned to the right, as if leaning into the wind, but they were perfectly legible, every word clear. Alyssa, I have watched you build your life the way I always wished I had built mine. Your mother inherited my fear. You inherited my courage. I am sorry it took me so long to say it out loud. Do not wait for them to see you. The right people already do. Gran Violet. I read the note 3 times. Then I cried. Not the way people cry in stories, a single, elegant tear rolling down a cheek. I wept. Ugly, ragged, sobbing over the steering wheel of my Volkswagen estate in a church car park I had never been to before. Engine off, windows fogging up with the heat of a grief I had carried for 10 years. I reached into my bag. The handkerchief. The faded VS monogram, soft cotton, held for a decade. I pressed it to my face. It smelled of lavender and Gran's chest of drawers. The only person in the family who ever thought to ask. She gave me £500 when I was 22, a handkerchief when I had nothing, and tonight, 17 lines of shaky handwriting that said what my parents couldn't manage in a lifetime. I sat in that car park for 20 minutes. Then I drove home to Manchester. 48 hours. That's how long it took for the dust to settle. My mother rang 7 times. I let every single call go to voicemail. The first 3 were angry. Clipped sentences, controlled rage. The voice of a woman utterly convinced she has been wronged by the person she wronged. You humiliated me in front of the Harringtons, Alice. In front of Catherine. Do you realize what you've done? The next 2 were wet. Tears, pauses, blowing her nose. I am your mother. You can't just walk away from your mother. That isn't how families work. The final 2 were just silence. 10 seconds of static, then a click. Arthur sent 1 text message on Monday afternoon. 4 words. Your mum's very upset. I read it. I didn't reply. Daisy texted on Sunday evening. I'm sorry I never asked. Can we talk? Not about mum, just us. I read it. I didn't delete it. I haven't replied yet, but I haven't deleted it. Catherine Harrington emailed me on Monday morning from her corporate account. Subject: dinner and contracts. Alice, my son is marrying into a fascinating family, but he is marrying your sister, not your mother. Your company remains our most valued partner. Let's get dinner sometime. Not business. Just 2 women who work incredibly hard and know exactly what it costs. Catherine, I printed that email and pinned it to the notice board in my office, right next to the very first pound coin I earned cleaning that dental clinic on Deansgate. On Sunday morning, exactly on schedule, my phone rang. Gran Violet. I answered on the second ring. How's my girl? Better, Gran. Getting better. Did you read my note? Every word. 3 times. Good. Now put it somewhere safe and go run your business. So I did. On Monday morning at 7:15 a.m., I walked into the headquarters of Stanton Commercial Services in central Manchester. 3,000 square feet of open-plan office space. Glass-walled meeting rooms. A staff kitchen that always smells of Agnieszka's coffee brewed so strong it could dissolve a teaspoon. Agnieszka was waiting by my desk with 2 mugs. My first employee. My first ally in this industry. Now the regional manager for the Northwest. 15 years older than me. With the shoulders of a woman who never asked anyone for permission. Boss, you look like you had a good weekend, she said, handing me a mug. Family dinner? Something like that. I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. 312 unread emails. One was from Catherine Harrington's office, a 3-year contract extension on improved terms. A note from her PA read, Mrs. Harrington requested we expedite this. I leaned back in my chair and looked at the spray bottle on my desk. Lemon, white vinegar, water. The recipe I mixed in my studio flat at 22 when I couldn't afford anything better. I unscrewed the cap and held it to my nose. The same scent. The same sharpness. The same woman, just older, harder, with 283 people who rely on her to turn up every morning and do the work properly. My mother called me a house cleaner. She wasn't wrong about the verb. I do clean. We clean the private hospitals where people recover. We clean the office buildings where people build their careers. We clean the civic centres where local justice is administered. We clean the university lecture halls where the next generation learns. There is nothing small about what we do. On my desk, in a black metal frame, sits the very first business card I ever had printed. Year 1. Terrible font, cheap paper, a logo I designed on a free website at 2 a.m. I've never taken it down. 2 weeks later, I rang my mother. Once. The only time I initiated contact after that dinner. She answered on the first ring. Didn't say hello. Just breathed into the receiver. I'm ringing to tell you something, I said. Silence. I love you. That hasn't changed. But I will never again attend a family gathering where you or Dad present me as less than I am. If that means I miss Christmases, I'll miss them. If that means we see each other less, then we see each other less. It's not a punishment. It's a boundary. You are choosing your pride over your family, she hissed. I am choosing my peace. They are not the same thing, Mum. Dad has my number. He hasn't used it once. She hung up. I sat in the quiet for 30 seconds. It wasn't an empty silence. It was full. The way a room feels full when you rearrange the furniture and suddenly realize everything is finally in the right place. I rung Gran Violet. How did it go? Exactly as I expected. Did you say everything you needed to say? Every word? Yes. Then that is enough, darling. It's enough. I looked at the business card on my desk. The very first one. Year 1. Then I looked at my current one. Navy blue, crisp font. 14 regions. 283 employees. The same woman, the same work, just a different scale. My mother told the groom's family that I clean houses for a living. She was right. I do clean. I clean offices, hospitals, council buildings, and schools. I built an empire on a job my parents thought was beneath them. And I did it without their money, without their approval, and without a single moment of their pride. Those who care already know. Those who don't never would have anyway. 3 months later, my parents still haven't rung. Not once. But the story spread the way stories spread in market towns. Through the aunts and uncles who sat at that table, through cousins who heard it secondhand, through the parish committees Eleanor runs with an iron fist, people Googled my company. They found the website, the client list, the staff numbers. They found a profile in a Northwest business journal from 2 years ago, the very article my mother refused to read. Eleanor lost control of the narrative. For the first time in 30 years, the story of the Stanton family she peddled in Oakhaven stopped matching the facts anyone could verify with a 5-second internet search. Daisy drove up to Manchester on a Saturday. We met at a cafe near my office. She ordered pancakes and spent the first 10 minutes staring at her hands. "I looked up your company," she said. "You have a Wikipedia page. A short one." She smiled, restrained, hesitant. The smile of someone learning to ask the questions they should have asked years ago. "We aren't close yet. We may never be what sisters are supposed to be, but she is trying, and I am leaving the door open. Catherine and I have dinner once a quarter. Not always about business. Sometimes it's just 2 women who built everything from nothing and know exactly what it costs. Last month she sent me a referral, an NHS trust in Yorkshire, looking for a cleaning partner. 6 sites, roughly £2 million a year. Arthur texted me once, 3 months after the dinner. 6 words. Shouldn't have said that night. I read it. I didn't reply, but I kept the message. Gran Violet rings every Sunday. Her voice is thinner now. The heart medication exhausts her, but she still asks about my numbers, my staff, my plans, and I still answer every single question. My parents told everyone I just clean. They weren't wrong about the verb. They were wrong about the word just. There is nothing just about building something from nothing. There is nothing just about 283 families eating dinner because of the work we do. Gran gave me £500, a handkerchief, and a note that said, "You inherited my courage." That was the only inheritance that ever mattered. The people who see you already see you, and for those who refuse to, no amount of proof will ever be enough. This is my story. 10 years of silence, 1 dinner that said everything. This story leaves behind not just a sense of astonishment, but a profound urge to reflect on how we view the people we consider closest to us. Alice's journey reveals how dangerous it is to judge someone by their profession, their outward status, their income level, or the image of them that formed in our minds years ago. The most painful aspect here isn't even that her parents undervalued her success. It's that for so long, they refused to see her as an independent person with her own dreams, decisions, and the right to choose her own path. When Alice, at 22, decided to reject the forced master's degree and start a commercial cleaning business, her mother didn't even want to look at her business plan. Instead of support, she received mockery about a grand master plan to scrub toilets. But that was exactly when the journey began that would change her life entirely. For me, the primary lesson of this story is that a person's dignity is never defined by their job title. Cleaning might seem basic or unglamorous to some, but behind that work lies discipline, responsibility, physical graft, the organization of people, and an immense benefit to society. Alice didn't just clean spaces. She built a company, provided jobs for hundreds of people, and maintained the environments of hospitals, universities, civic buildings, and major corporations. Her business expanded across 14 regions with 283 staff and an 87% retention rate. This is precisely why we must never look down on someone just because their labor doesn't align with a narrow view of success. The presence of Gran Violet in this story is particularly moving. While almost the entire family viewed Alice through the lens of their own expectations, it was her grandmother who chose to look at her properly. She didn't laugh at her granddaughter's business plan. She asked where she saw the company in a few years. It's a simple question, but sometimes one sincere question can alter a person's destiny more profoundly than 100 pieces of unsolicited advice. Violet gave Alice more than money and an old handkerchief. She gave her something infinitely more valuable, the feeling that someone believed in her, That kind of support often becomes the internal foundation a person relies on during their hardest years. I imagine many people might see themselves in Alice. Sometimes parents, spouses, siblings, or even friends construct a specific persona for us, and then insist on viewing us exclusively through that filter. If someone was once deemed a failure, they remain a failure in those eyes. If they made a mistake, they are reminded of it for years. If they chose an unconventional career, it's dismissed as a passing phase. But people evolve. Their capabilities expand, and their character strengthens. As loved ones, our duty isn't to trap people in the past, but to recognize who they are becoming today. I find the moment Alice finally stopped trying to prove her worth to her parents especially poignant. She grasped a simple but painful truth. You cannot force someone to see what they are deliberately choosing to ignore. She shared her achievements and showed her results, yet her parents continued to view her through an old, restrictive label. So, Alice stopped wasting her energy on endless attempts to prove her dignity. This is a crucial life lesson. Sometimes we pour far too much energy into people we are desperate to convince of our worth. But respect shouldn't have to be begged for. It is earned through action. However, others still have the right to ignore our achievements, and when they do, it's vital that we don't destroy ourselves seeking their validation. The scene at the family dinner powerfully illustrates why personal boundaries are necessary, even with relatives. Alice didn't attend the dinner to humiliate her parents or flaunt her wealth. She went primarily for her grandmother. When asked directly about her work, she simply answered honestly. She didn't shout, she didn't insult her mother, and she didn't turn the dinner into a competition. She calmly stated what she did, how many staff she employed, and how many regions her company covered. It was this very calmness that made her position so unassailable. She wasn't seeking revenge, she merely stopped shrinking herself for the convenience of others. There is another vital lesson here. A boundary is not a punishment. Boundaries exist not to inflict pain, but to protect your own dignity. When Alice decided she would no longer attend family gatherings where she was intentionally diminished, she wasn't destroying the family. She was dictating the terms under which she was willing to engage. That is a mature stance. Loving your parents does not mean you are obliged to tolerate humiliation. Loving your relatives does not mean you must accept injustice. Yet, the story doesn't urge us to simply sever ties with everyone who fails to understand us. Conversely, Daisy's arc shows that relationships can sometimes be rebuilt, step by step. Daisy finally began asking the questions she had previously avoided, and Alice left the door open. That is a profoundly human response. Forgiveness doesn't always mean forgetting the past or instantly restoring old intimacy. Sometimes, forgiveness means giving someone the chance to prove, through their actions, that they are capable of change. It also seems vital that Alice refused to let someone else's snobbery make her ashamed of her labor. She affirmed that she does indeed clean hospitals, universities, and other institutions, and that there is nothing small about it. This idea is particularly relevant in today's society, where people are too often judged by the prestige of their profession, their salary, their clothes, their car, or their social standing. But behind all honest work lies human dignity. You cannot deem one person superior to another simply because their job looks better on paper. Applying this story to our own lives, we ought to ask ourselves, is there someone close to us whom we have stopped truly seeing? Perhaps we have grown accustomed to viewing a child as unserious, a spouse as incapable, a sibling as a failure, or an old friend as someone without prospects. Perhaps they changed long ago, but we are still conversing with a past version of them. Sometimes, a single, genuine request, "Tell me how you really are," can restore a person's sense of self-worth. One final lesson feels fundamental. We must not wait for others to give us permission to live our own lives. Alice began her journey without her parents' approval. She worked early mornings, managed the accounts, chased clients, hired staff, made mistakes, and kept going. It was consistency, not a stroke of luck, that led to her success. Therefore, it is essential for everyone to learn to respect their own path, even when those around them cannot yet see the destination. Ultimately, this story is not about money or business. It is about human dignity. True success begins the moment a person stops living solely for the approval of others. One genuine person in your corner is often worth more than 100 people who smile but don't believe in you. Parents shouldn't try to architect their children's lives, but rather support them in finding their own way. And a profession should never be a source of shame if it is carried out honestly and with respect for others. Gran Violet stands as a symbol of wisdom because she didn't demand that Alice fit a certain mold. She just saw her as she truly was. We all occasionally need someone to say, "I see how hard you are trying." Those words can sustain a person when they begin to doubt themselves. Moreover, the silence of loved ones in the face of injustice can inflict as much pain as an open insult. At the same time, we cannot spend our lives waiting for others to acknowledge our achievements. Sometimes, the healthiest choice is to quietly set boundaries. Boundaries are not cruel. A true boundary preserves respect even when previous closeness is no longer viable. Love without respect inevitably devolves into dependence and resentment. Success is especially sweet when it doesn't turn you into the kind of person who once belittled you. Alice is remarkable not merely because she became wealthy, but because she retained her ability to value the labor of others and her own dignity. The core message of the story is that you don't need to be deemed great in everyone's eyes. It is enough simply not to lose yourself. Let everyone who hears this story reflect not only on those who may have underestimated them, but also on whether they are underestimating someone right next to them. Ultimately, this tale reminds us, true human worth doesn't materialize only at the moment others acknowledge it. It was there all along. Alice's parents might not have seen her, but that didn't mean she lacked strength. Her family might not have been proud, but that didn't negate her hard work. Someone might have dismissed her as just a cleaner, but behind that word stood hundreds of jobs, responsibility for massive estates, years of sleepless nights, and the respect of those who truly understood her profession. So, if you currently find yourself in a situation where someone doesn't believe in you, don't rush to prove your worth through shouting, conflict, or revenge. Continue to live with dignity. Keep growing, learning, working, and treating people with decency. Recognition may come, or it may not, but your life must still belong to you. And if, conversely, you are the one judging someone else today, pause for a moment and ask yourself, do you truly know their life? Perhaps behind the quiet person you consider ordinary are years of struggle you never witnessed. Perhaps behind an unglamorous job is a person with immense character. Perhaps behind your child's silence is a desperate wish to finally be heard. Sometimes, the greatest kindness we can offer another human being is not to give them yet another piece of advice, but simply to listen properly. This story is shared for educational and reflective purposes. It is intended to provoke thought on human relationships, respect for labor, self-worth, family boundaries, and the consequences of prejudice toward loved ones. The events described should be adapted to one's own circumstances, considering personal situations and the feelings of others. The goal is not revenge, proving superiority, or humiliating those who undervalued you, but rather maintaining human dignity, respect, and inner peace. May this story remind us all, never demean someone for their profession, do not judge a loved one based on outdated assumptions, and never force another person to shrink just so you can feel more comfortable beside them. Respect begins with the ability to see a person as they are today, and wisdom begins with the understanding that someone else's life path is not obliged to match our expectations.